He won't admit it. He might not even be fully aware of it. But deep down, beneath the logic, the pride, and the posturing, there's one thing he fantasizes about more than anything else: a bold move that catches him off guard and leaves him wanting more. You think it's the way you look or how softly you speak, but it's not. It's something deeper, something primal. Men crave a woman who doesn't ask for permission to be unforgettable. This one bold move you're about to discover, it's not just about attraction. It's about awakening something in him he didn't know he needed. When a woman initiates without hesitation, something profound happens, not just in the space between her and a man, but within his psyche. You see, most men are wired to lead, to pursue, to conquer. That's the narrative they've been told to embody, but what they rarely admit, even to themselves, is how deeply captivating it is when a woman flips that script, not out of neediness or desperation, but out of certainty. When she makes the first move, whether it's a confident touch on his arm, a deliberate step closer, or a kiss that silences everything else in the world, she disrupts the pattern he's known his whole life. She becomes unforgettable, not because she's loud or aggressive, but because she's decisive. That single moment of her choosing to act without hesitation cuts through the noise of passive glances and lukewarm gestures that men encounter daily. He says something ancient and undeniable: I am not afraid of what I want. This boldness doesn't need to be grandiose. It can be subtle, elegant, but intentional. It's the difference between walking into a room hoping to be noticed and walking in with a quiet command of presence, then choosing to speak, move, or touch in a way that says, I'm not waiting for permission to connect. And make no mistake, men notice. They may laugh it off, pretend it didn't shake them, but deep inside it registers. It challenges their expectations. It disrupts the monotony. Because when a woman initiates without hesitation, she instantly elevates herself above the rest. She signals not only confidence, but also a certain fearlessness about intimacy, emotional and physical. It's not just the act, it's what the act represents. I am here, and I trust myself enough to act on what I feel. To a man, that's magnetic. Why? Because the truth is, most men live in emotional restraint. They're trained to suppress feelings, to maintain control, to avoid vulnerability. So when a woman steps into that emotional space boldly, he feels seen in a way that's rare. Her initiative grants him permission to drop his armor. Suddenly, he's not playing a role, he's present. And in that presence, something shifts. The connection deepens not because she proved herself to him, but because she modeled what it looks like to be real. That single gesture of her reaching out first, asking the direct question, breaking the physical barrier, acts like a mirror. It forces him to look at his own hesitation, his own barriers. And it sparks desire, not just for her body, but for her clarity, her boldness, her aliveness. Then lastly, of course, not every man knows how to handle that kind of energy. Some will retreat, confused or intimidated. But the men who are worth your time, the ones who are emotionally mature, who are hungry for more than surface level flirtation, those men will feel awakened, not because you chased them, but because you showed them something different, something dangerous in its honesty, something rare in its simplicity. And here's the secret: it's not about being the alpha female or dominating him. It's not about control at all. It's about congruence. When your actions align with your feelings, when you feel the pull and don't hesitate to act on it, that's power, not performative power. Real, grounded, feminine power, the kind that doesn't scream or compete. It just is. And that's what men fantasize about. A woman who acts from that place of inner alignment, who doesn't wait for the green light of approval, who doesn't fear rejection because she knows that expressing her truth is never a loss, no matter the outcome. A woman who moves toward what she desires, not because she's lacking, but because she's full of clarity, full of intention, full of life. That's the kind of woman who haunts his thoughts, not because she did something wild or scandalous, but because she made him feel something rare, chosen, not chased, desired, not manipulated, and above all, seen. So the next time you feel that urge to wait, to hesitate, to second guess whether it's okay to reach out, speak up, or lean in, remember this: the woman who acts without hesitation doesn't need to prove herself to anyone. She already knows who she is. And when she makes that bold move, she's not just shifting the energy between her and a man. She's setting a new standard, a new rhythm, one where desire, confidence, and authenticity are not things to hide, but things to lead with. And that is the kind of bold that stays with him forever. She walks into the room like she owns it, not because she's trying to impress anyone, not because she's chasing attention, but because she has nothing to prove. Her presence alone shifts the atmosphere. She doesn't need to announce herself with loud laughter or overly dramatic movements. Instead, the way she carries herself speaks louder than words ever could. Her posture is upright, her eyes scan with calm awareness, and there's a stillness to her energy that demands respect. Not by force, but by nature. Because real confidence doesn't beg to be seen, it's impossible to ignore. And when she enters, people notice, not because she's the most glamorous woman in the room, but because she exudes something much rarer: certainty. Men especially feel it. They might not be able to articulate it, but they sense it immediately. This woman doesn't look for validation. She already knows her value. That subtle but powerful shift changes the entire dynamic. You see, most women are conditioned to ask the room for permission to shine, to wait for cues, for approval, for praise before they take up space. But the woman he fantasizes about, she takes up space naturally. She doesn't shrink herself to make others comfortable. She's not arrogant, but she's unapologetically grounded. She moves with purpose. Every step she takes is deliberate, not rushed. Every glance she gives carries weight, not desperation. She doesn't fidget or try to fill the silence. She lets the world adjust to her pace, not the other way around. And here's the deeper truth. Men are starving for that kind of presence. Because a woman who owns her space gives him permission to rise. She challenges him, not aggressively, but powerfully, to meet her at that same level of self-respect. She doesn't flirt to gain attention. She doesn't pretend to be smaller so he can feel larger. She's whole. And that wholeness is magnetic. It disrupts his ego and awakens his admiration, not just for how she looks, but for how she exists. He fantasizes about her not because she fits some physical ideal, but because she reminds him of what's possible when a woman fully inhabits her worth. Think about it. When a woman walks into a room consumed with insecurity, trying to prove her worth, hoping to be noticed, her energy is scattered, and men can sense that. They may respond, but it's surface level. But the woman who enters with inner alignment, the one who doesn't need to win anyone over because she's already chosen herself, that woman stays in his memory. She doesn't chase opportunities, she attracts them. She doesn't need a man to make her feel like a queen. She walks in already wearing the crown. And no, this isn't about arrogance or superiority. It's about integrity. She knows who she is. She's done the work. She's faced her own darkness, owned her story, and come out on the other side with strength, not bitterness. That's what makes her energy undeniable. She's not putting on a show. She's not using charm as currency. She's simply real in a world that constantly encourages women to edit themselves, to mold themselves, to shrink into socially acceptable shapes. She doesn't play that game. And that quiet rebellion, that refusal to apologize for her space, it captivates the kind of man who's tired of superficiality, the kind of man who's looking for something deeper, something that doesn't just excite him, but expands him. And here's the beautiful irony. The more she claims her space without effort, the more effort men will put in to be part of her world. Because her self-respect raises the bar, it creates a standard, and it challenges him to show up, not just as someone who wants her, but as someone worthy of standing next to her, not because she demands it with words, but because her energy leaves no room for anything less. This is the kind of boldness that doesn't come from ego. It comes from evolution. She didn't always walk like this. She built herself. She stopped waiting for someone to hand her power and decided to carry it in her own hands. That journey of reclaiming her voice, her desires, her dignity, is what gives her that commanding presence. And when she enters the room, men may look, but more importantly, they feel drawn, curious, and challenged. Because she doesn't just walk in, she arrives. And once she does, the room is never quite the same again. She makes him earn her vulnerability, not because she's cold, guarded, or playing games, but because she understands the immense value of her heart. In a world that often rushes intimacy and confuses openness with oversharing, this woman knows that true vulnerability is sacred. It's not something you give away lightly, and certainly not something you trade for fleeting attention or shallow approval. She is not emotionally inaccessible. She is emotionally intelligent. She's felt what it's like to give too much too soon. She's tasted the regret of trusting before observing. And now she lives with clarity. Her softness is powerful, but only when it's offered to someone who's proven they can hold it with care. A man may be attracted to her beauty, intrigued by her presence, captivated by her confidence, but what he fantasizes about most is the moment she lets him in, that quiet surrender, when she finally opens the door to her deeper self, not because she needs to, but because she chooses to. That moment doesn't come early. It's not for show. It's not a test. It's the result of consistency, effort, and authenticity on his part. She watches how he listens. She notices how he speaks about others. She pays attention to how he handles silence, disappointment, even tension, because how he handles those things tells her more than his compliments or gifts ever could. She understands that a man's real strength isn't in how loudly he boasts or how fast he pursues. It's in his patience, his depth, his ability to meet her in emotional places without flinching. And when she sees that, when she senses that he's not trying to possess her but to understand her, she responds slowly, naturally, without needing to be coerced. That's the magic. Her vulnerability is a reward, not a negotiation. It's something he earns over time through the small details of how he treats her, how he respects her boundaries, how he shows up, even when it's not easy. This is what most men don't realize. Women who know their worth aren't closed. They're selective. They've learned that vulnerability isn't just emotional expression, it's emotional exposure. And exposing yourself to the wrong person doesn't make you noble, it makes you empty. That's why she no longer confuses chemistry for compatibility. That's why she doesn't pour her soul out on the first few dates. She isn't cold, she's discerning. And that discernment, that refusal to throw her heart to anyone who looks good on paper, that's what makes her so compelling. Because when she finally does open up, when her voice softens, her eyes linger a second longer, and her guard falls just a little. He feels it deeply because he knows it's not a performance. It's real. And here's where the power lies. Her vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength under control. It's the ability to say, I've been through storms, I've healed my wounds, and I know exactly what I bring to the table. She doesn't use her past pain as armor, but she doesn't ignore it either. She's done the work, and because of that, she doesn't need to dump her history onto him. She reveals it slowly, intentionally, with the trust of someone who values herself too much to bleed for applause. And that's what drives men wild. Not the drama, not the chaos, but the quiet, earned access to a world most never get to see. Men are used to emotional availability that's driven by insecurity, the kind that says, if I give more, maybe he'll stay. But this woman is different. She's saying, if he stays, maybe I'll give more. And that distinction changes everything, because suddenly he's not just trying to win her affection, he's trying to deserve it. That subtle shift in dynamic elevates the entire connection. It calls him to a higher version of himself, not because she demands it, but because the bar is set by her example. He may fantasize about her body, he may be enchanted by her beauty, but what lingers in his mind, the thing that keeps him coming back, thinking, wondering, is the mystery of her heart. Not because she hides it, but because she doesn't hand it out like a coupon. She offers it the way all rare and beautiful things are offered, carefully, intentionally, and only to those who've earned it through truth, time, and trust. And when she finally lets him in, when he feels the depth of her emotion, the richness of her mind, the softness she'd protected for so long, it hits him harder than anything physical ever could. Because that kind of vulnerability isn't just intimate, it's unforgettable. It changes the man who receives it. It challenges him to protect it, to honor it, and if he's wise, to never take it for granted. She speaks truth without sugarcoating, not to provoke, not to dominate, but because she has outgrown the habit of deluding herself to make others comfortable. Her words are not wrapped in layers of unnecessary sweetness or laced with insecurity. They are clean, direct, and purposeful. And when she speaks, people listen, not because she's loud, but because she's honest. Her truth cuts through the noise of polite performance and passive-aggressive game. She doesn't use silence as a weapon or confusion as a strategy. She says what she means and means what she says. And in a world where most people are constantly editing themselves to be liked, her authenticity feels revolutionary. Men are particularly shaken by this kind of woman, not because she's aggressive or confrontational, but because her clarity leaves no place to hide. She doesn't ask leading questions just to fish for validation. She doesn't manipulate with guilt or drop hints hoping someone will read between the lines. She says it outright. If she's interested, she says so. If something hurts, she names it. If she's done, without theatrics. This kind of transparency demands maturity from the man who stands across from her, because when you face a woman like this, you can no longer coast on charm or avoid depth. You are seen. You are called to meet her in the space of truth or step aside. But understand this, she is not cruel. Her honesty isn't a weapon, it's a discipline. She has no interest in tearing people down just to appear strong. In fact, she's tender beneath the truth. But she knows that real intimacy is impossible without honesty. So she doesn't flatter to maintain false peace. She doesn't pretend to agree just to avoid discomfort. She doesn't lower her standards so someone else won't feel insecure. She speaks with integrity, and that integrity is what makes her irresistible, because she offers something rare, certainty in a world filled with masks. Men fantasize about this not because they want to be corrected or criticized, but because deep down they're tired too. Tired of guessing, tired of trying to decode mixed signals, tired of emotional games that leave them confused and disconnected. The woman who speaks truth offers relief. With her, he doesn't have to perform. He doesn't have to pretend. He knows where he stands. He knows what she values. And that level of clarity creates a bond that most people never experience. A bond that doesn't just rely on chemistry, but on character. And make no mistake, this kind of woman isn't easy to impress. She's not swayed by empty gestures or polished words. She listens for substance. She watches for consistency. And when something feels off, she won't bury it. She'll bring it up, not to attack, but to understand. Her truth-telling isn't impulsive. It's responsible. She speaks when it matters, not just when she's triggered. She knows that timing is part of wisdom, and she has both. That combination, honesty and maturity, is magnetic. It commands respect, even from those who aren't ready to meet it. This bold communication doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from self-respect. She spent too many years betraying herself to make others happy. She's learned the cost of silence, the weight of unspoken pain, the regret of pretending to be okay when she wasn't. And now, she refuses to carry that weight any longer. She's chosen truth as a lifestyle, not because it's easy, but because it's clean. And in doing so, she has become the kind of woman a man remembers, not for how agreeable she was, but for how real she was. And here's the irony. Her honesty may scare some men away, but only the ones who were never ready for something real. The ones who stay, they rise, they grow, they meet her in that space of truth, and together they build something that can actually last, because truth is the foundation of trust. And she knows that without trust, love is just a fantasy. So she keeps speaking, calmly, clearly, without sugarcoating, not to be harsh, but to be free. And in her freedom, she gives him permission to be honest too, to drop the act, to show up fully, to speak his own truth without fear of judgment. That's not just attractive, it's transformational. That's the kind of woman men don't just desire, it's the kind they need, even if they don't know it yet. She walks away first when it matters most, not to prove a point, not to manipulate, but because she knows exactly what she's worth and refuses to settle for anything less. This isn't about drama, it's about dignity. She doesn't wait until she's begging for scraps of attention. She doesn't linger in places where her presence is no longer valued. She doesn't twist herself trying to be understood or exhaust her energy hoping someone will finally choose her. No. When she senses that something is off, when the respect fades, when the communication turns cold, when the effort begins to die, she doesn't chase. She walks. And this is where she becomes unforgettable. You see, the average woman stays too long out of fear, out of hope, out of the belief that maybe, just maybe, if she's patient enough, kind enough, quiet enough, everything will change. But the woman who walks away first, she lives by a different code. She understands that love without effort isn't love at all. That attention given only when convenient is not affection, it's control. So when the energy shifts, when the excuses stack higher than the effort, she doesn't beg, she doesn't plead, she simply exits with grace. Men fantasize about her not because she's hard to get, but because she's hard to forget. Not because she plays games, but because she won't play them. She has the courage to end something when it no longer aligns with her spirit, even if she cares. even if it hurts, even if her heart is still involved. That's what makes her powerful. Most people wait to be pushed. She leaves before she has to be, because she's not interested in dragging dead weight. She doesn't confuse potential with reality. And she no longer sacrifices her peace on the altar of someone else's confusion. This kind of woman doesn't announce her departure with bitterness or blame. She doesn't slam doors or burn bridges just to be seen. Her goodbye is clean, quiet, undeniable. And that silence, it echoes in the mind of the man she left behind, because he realizes too late that she was the rare kind, the kind who loved with depth, who showed up fully, who gave him the opportunity to rise. And when he failed to meet her there, she didn't lower her standards. She left with her head high and her soul intact. She walks away not because she's heartless, but because she's honest. Honest enough to accept when something has run its course. Honest enough to see when words no longer match actions. She doesn't hang around collecting proof of neglect just to justify leaving. She already knows, and when she knows, she's gone. And this terrifies men who've been used to women who stay no matter how carelessly they're treated. Men who think time guarantees loyalty, who believe effort can be rationed without consequence. With her, they learn the hard truth. Attention is not affection, and proximity is not presence. If you take her for granted, you lose her. Period. She walks away first because her self-worth is not up for negotiation, because she would rather be alone with her peace than entangled in a relationship that slowly starves her soul. That's not cold. That's courage. And it's the kind of courage that leaves a permanent mark. It shakes a man to his core, not because she hurt him, but because she revealed to him, by leaving, how much he had to lose. And the truth is, he did lose something, not just a woman, but a mirror that showed him what it meant to be held to a higher standard, to be expected to grow, to communicate, to show up like a man, not just a boy playing dress-up. That's why the fantasy lingers, not of her body, but of her boundaries, of her backbone, of her quiet strength that knew when to walk even when she still loved him. Because that kind of woman is rare. She doesn't just make an impression, she makes an impact. And the man who let her go, he'll see her face in every woman who lacks her fire. He'll hear her silence louder than any word she ever said. He'll remember that she could have stayed, but chose herself instead. And in the end, that's the boldest move a woman can make. Not loving fiercely, not giving deeply, but knowing exactly when to stop. Not because she's tired of loving, but because she's finally started loving herself more. She's comfortable with desire, not ashamed of it. That in itself is revolutionary, because for generations women have been taught to suppress their longing, to disguise their want, to make their needs smaller, quieter, and easier to swallow. But this woman has broken free of that conditioning. She no longer treats her desire as something dangerous, dirty, or disruptive. She knows that desire, emotional, physical, spiritual, is not a flaw. It's not a weakness. It's a sign that she's alive, fully, wildly, and unapologetically alive. And that aliveness is magnetic. When she wants something, when she wants him, she doesn't hide behind coy games or passive silence. She lets it show in her voice, in her eyes, in the way she holds a gaze longer than necessary, not to seduce, but because she's unafraid of being seen. She doesn't lower her eyes to protect herself from judgment. She doesn't dim her light just to make others feel comfortable. Her desire is not desperate, it's deliberate. She doesn't chase, she invites, and that invitation doesn't scream, it whispers with confidence, because she knows that the power of feminine energy doesn't come from force. It comes from receptivity. Men are drawn to this, not because she throws herself at them, but because she's not hiding from herself. There's no awkwardness in her touch, no insecurity in her words, no apology in her closeness. She isn't performing desire. She's embodying it, and that changes everything, because most women have been taught to edit their expression, to wait for the man to initiate, to carry the burden of passion, to be the one who always wants more. But when she steps into that space, when she looks him in the eyes and lets him know she wants him, not just physically, but with emotional clarity, it hits differently. It stops him, challenges him, awakens him, because she's not asking for anything, she's declaring something. Her desire doesn't seek permission, it doesn't wait to be validated, it exists on its own terms. And that's what makes it so powerful. It's not the desire itself that captivates him, it's her comfort with it, her lack of shame, her quiet confidence. Because when a woman is unashamed of her desire, she gives a man permission to feel his own. And suddenly, he's not just in the presence of attraction, he's in the presence of freedom. Freedom to feel, to express, to connect without masks or mechanics. And make no mistake, her comfort with desire doesn't mean she gives it away freely to just anyone. In fact, it's the opposite. Because she values her desire, she's selective with where she places it. She doesn't let a man's charm distract her from his character. She doesn't confuse lust for loyalty. She owns her attraction, but she also owns her standards. Her yes means something because it's not built on fear or pressure. It's built on choice. And that's what makes it sacred. Desired not because it's rare, but because it's real. She knows that her sensuality is not separate from her intelligence, that her softness does not weaken her strength, that her hunger for connection does not mean she's incomplete. She isn't ashamed of wanting love, passion, closeness, or depth. She doesn't pretend she's above it all. She doesn't fake detachment to appear in control. She's secure enough to say, I want, and strong enough to walk away if that want is not met with respect. This kind of woman doesn't just stir a man's body, she stirs his consciousness. She makes him aware of how many women fake it, how many flirt without feeling, how many go through the motions while suppressing their truth. But she moves with truth. When she reaches for him, it's not calculated, it's clear. When she speaks, it's not suggestive, it's sincere. And in that sincerity lies a kind of beauty that's impossible to fabricate. And here's the most powerful part. She doesn't need to be desired to feel worthy. She already feels worthy. Her desire is not a tool to be validated by someone else. It's a language she's fluent in. She knows what ignites her, what draws her closer, what touches her soul. And by knowing herself that deeply, she becomes the kind of woman who teaches a man to know himself too. He fantasizes about her, not because she's aggressive, but because she's awake. Not because she plays hard to get, but because she's not afraid to get real. Her presence feels like an invitation to drop all the false layers and meet her in truth, flesh, feeling, fire, and all. And when she finally gives herself emotionally, physically, spiritually, it's not out of performance or fear of loss. It's out of abundance. A giving that's full, complete, whole. She's not ashamed of her desire. She honors it, she nourishes it, and in doing so, she becomes unforgettable, not just as a lover, but as a woman who reminded him that passion, when grounded in self-respect, isn't chaotic. It's divine. In the end, it's not the loudest woman in the room who leaves the deepest mark. It's the one who moves with quiet power, unshaken by the need to prove herself. The woman who initiates without hesitation, who enters with presence, who reveals her heart only to those who've earned it, who speaks truth without apology, who walks away before she's ever diminished, and who embraces her desire as a sacred, powerful force, not a secret to hide. This is the woman who doesn't beg to be chosen. She chooses herself. And in doing so, she becomes the kind of woman a man never forgets, not because she tried to be unforgettable, but because she was unafraid to be fully herself, bold, clear, whole. So let this be your reminder. Your boldness is not too much. Your standards are not unreasonable. Your desire is not shameful. You are not here to perform for love. You are here to embody it. And the man who's worthy of your energy, he won't just notice you. He'll rise to meet you. Because when you stop apologizing for your power, you don't lose love. You attract the kind that's finally worthy of you.